This podcast brought to you by Podcast Center LA.
Action, focus, discipline. This is the Zero Excuses podcast. Each and every week, we talk to high-performing, inspirational athletes, entrepreneurs, and leaders. We ask powerful questions to extract their tools, strategies, and life lessons for you to crush your excuses, to break out of your comfort zone, and accomplish your ambitious dreams and goals. Here's your host, Kenyon Zitska.
Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. We've got another great guest lined up for you guys today. We have Tim Bratz joining us today to talk about real estate investment. He's the CEO and founder of CLE Turnkey Real Estate, and he is here to join us to break down some of the basics of investing in commercial real estate, and also to talk about some of the myths that you might have about what it takes to invest in commercial real estate. You'll be surprised how simpler it is than residential real estate investment, and I learned a ton from our conversation. I know you will too. Definitely grab a pen and paper before you continue listening to today's topic. But while you go and grab a pen and paper, just have a couple quick reminders as always. First, if you haven't already done so, would appreciate it if you went and subscribed to the show over on iTunes. And while you're there, also would appreciate it if you left us a rating and review. And also, if this is really resonating with you and you know some friends or family members that would get benefit from listening to the topics and implementing some strategies that we talk about here on the show, go ahead and share it with them. Would greatly appreciate that. And secondly, if you want to take these strategies and these tools and install the habits and the routines and the discipline in your life necessary to get the results that you want, encourage you to apply to our Elite Discipline Coaching Program at kenyonzitska.com/discipline. It's a short application that you fill out, and you'll also have the opportunity to schedule a one-on-one, 1 hour long consultation with me to go over some dynamic strategies that you can implement right away, and also to go over some ways that we can work together to do just that. Again, you can do that at kenyonzitska.com/discipline. Enough on all that. Let's get into today's conversation with Tim. Tim, thanks for taking time out of what I'm sure is a busy schedule to join us here on the Zero Excuses podcast today. Excited to have you on.
Thanks for having me, brother. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, so the reason I'm excited to talk with you, I've had a bunch of real estate gurus on before, and I'm always thirsty for different perspectives and new knowledge in this area. And I think you're a perfect person to bring on the show here to talk a little more about that. And I know you've spent some time here in Charleston, where I currently live, and I'm also maybe get some insider tips on buying property down in this area. But before we get into all that, why don't you give yourself a quick introduction? Tell us who you are, what you do, and maybe we'll start digging into a little bit of your history and your background, how you arrived to do what you do today.
Sure. Well, once again, man, honored to be here. Really appreciate the time and love all the value and stuff that you're putting out there. So appreciate you. Yeah, man, I got involved in real estate after college, 2007. Everybody's like, make money by getting involved in real estate. My brother lived in New York City. I moved out to New York and was a real estate agent on the commercial side. So I'd broker leases for businesses and landlords, and brokered one lease, 400 square foot space, and the rent was $10,000 a month for 12 years. And there was a 4% escalation every single year. And I did the math on it and saw the landlord was making $2 million over the next 12 years for doing something at one point in time. And I was like, man, I'm on the wrong side of the coin. So we had a bad winter actually up in New York. And I was like, I'm done with this. I want some lifestyle. Moved down to your neck of the woods in Charleston, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And yeah, man, just dove into books and courses and went through that whole analysis paralysis phase, thinking I need to learn everything before I can do anything, and then realized that I wasn't going to learn how to swim by reading about it in a book. I needed to actually get in the water. And so I got creative. This is in 2009 now. The market had shifted. Foreclosures were going through the roof, but the cheapest house in the entire Charleston MLS was still $25,000. And I'm a punk 23-year-old kid at the time who does not have $25,000.
Right.
But I was pretty resourceful. And I remember Tony Robbins saying, resourcefulness is the ultimate resource. Doesn't matter if you don't have time or money or knowledge or expertise. If you're resourceful, you'll figure it out. And that's what I did, man. I called up my credit card company, got them to increase my credit limit up to $15,000. And I made an offer on that house, got it for $14,000, and essentially wrote a check, a balance transfer check, to the closing attorney. And he's like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? You guys, you got to put this in your bank first. I can't just take like a perforated check. And so I was like, oh, okay, yeah. And deposited in my bank account, came back the nenext day with a certified funds check, closed on the property, did all the work myself. This is on Tillman Avenue off of Dorchester. So it was pretty beat up area back then.
Oh yeah.
And I'm doing all the, there's bars on the windows, and I'm taking the bars off and painting all the trim and painting the house and doing the landscaping, learning how to change out carpet by Googling it and watching YouTube videos on how to change out light fixtures, and bringing my buddies along, literally paying them in beer and pizza, and got to a point where we got the house at least looking decent. It wasn't fully functional, but it looked good. And I put some lipstick on the pig, and then decided, it's time to sell this thing. And so I printed out some flyers, knocked on all the neighbors' doors, told them I was holding an open house, and ended up having one of the neighbors come through at the open house, make me an offer for $33,000. And so I was into it for about 19, maybe 20,000. So I walked away with right around $13,000 in, from start to finish. It took about 75 days. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is the biggest check I've ever had in my entire life. Yeah, and went and did it again. And, and then you come down a road where you get into wholesaling, and you realize that you can just sell contracts. And I really like that piece. And then I started meeting people who knew that I knew what a good deal was. And these folks maybe had money, but they didn't have the time. They didn't have the expertise on how to invest in real estate. So was able to develop some partnerships where they put up the money, I did all the work, and we were able to split the deals equitably. And actually, I probably gave up a little bit too much equity in a lot of my early deals. But, I realized I needed to build up a resume. I needed to be able to posture up with other lenders and banks and sellers by getting more deals under my belt. And so I was okay with that. I was making kind of an investment in my future. So I gave up probably 70% of my first 250 deals that I did. And but it laid a foundation that gave me the expertise and the knowledge and the skill set and the confidence to build a big business. And so just kind of been doing my own thing for the past about 3 years now. So I've been in real estate for 10 years, only been really good for the past about 3 years. Yeah. And that snowball effect and the compound effect has really set in where we got some really awesome momentum. So fast forward to today, I've done everything in residential real estate. I've bought land and flipped land. I've flipped high-end retail houses. I've done low-end retail flips. I've done turnkey, done hundreds of turnkey houses. I started up a management company, and I've owned a couple of small apartment buildings. And in reflecting on my business a couple of years ago, I was like, man, majority of my wealth is coming from these apartments, and it's a small fraction of my time. So I decided to focus more on apartments and just eliminate all the other noise. And when you make that commitment and just kind of burn the ships to everything else, it's funny how the universe responds. And so over the course of the past 36 months, I built up a portfolio of 1,400 apartment units, rentals, and we have another over 1,200 units under contract to close in the next 90 days. So I'll be over 2,500 units by first quarter of 2019.
Right on. So let me understand this a little bit more detail. These 14, you talk about 1,400 units. These are all this is all under management, right? So you don't own these personally, right?
No, I own these.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I own all these, and I own and we have in-house management that manages these too. But yeah, these are all properties that I own. I have equitable interest in all of them. Not all of them I own 100% of. I have partners and joint venture partners and equity investors. But
Gotcha.
Some of the stuff that I own, like in South Carolina and Georgia, I probably own 30% of those, but I'm completely passive in them, and they spit off hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in cash flow for me. And then I have properties up here in Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I live now, where I own, 80% of, 100% of those apartment buildings.
Right on. So you use the term passive income in there. And one thing that I've realized here recently is that passive income is taxed much differently than the old earned income model that so many of us have kind of clung on to. People that work the 9 to 5 or your standard job get taxed at a much higher rate than one who earns their income through passive income, and so many people fail to realize that can be a very, very effective way to plan their tax strategy and keep more money that you earn. It sounds kind of backwards, but I just wanted to highlight that for the listeners out there. I'm sure you recognize that at a very early age, right?
Well, here's the thing. You need to realize that the tax code for the United States was drafted to benefit small business owners and landowners. So by owning property, you have better tax benefits, and owning a real estate investment company, you have better tax benefits than most other even businesses, and definitely people who have a W-2 type of income. Mm-hmm. So we have more deductions and more ways to offset our investment income than most other people. So the huge benefit is when you're a full-time real estate investor. I know you're going to be making that leap pretty soon here, bud. When you're a full-time real estate investor, you can offset your earned income, your earned real estate income, with passive losses. And when you have an apartment building that depreciates over time, and especially with the new tax codes, tax laws that were just passed recently, you can accelerate the depreciation, meaning instead of having to wait 40 years to depreciate this $1 million building, you can start writing up, you can accelerate the depreciation, take a lot more on the front end, and offset your earned income as a full-time real estate investor with passive losses, which allows you to reduce your tax liability, which puts more cash in your pocket, which allows you to then leverage that into more deals, more real estate investments. So it gives you more opportunity to take advantage of the cash flow early on while you're in that growth phase.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that explanation. Another thing I want to back up to that I noticed throughout your introduction is that you were a massive action taker at a very early age, and you didn't hesitate to learn everything you need to learn before taking action. Let's dig into that mindset a little bit, because that's one of my favorite topics to talk about, whether it's dealing with real estate or taking action in your relationships in your life. Like you really need to learn some, but don't wait till you know everything to take action. Was that something you were born and bred with, or you just saw an opportunity and just leapt? Took a leap off the edge. Can you describe that a little bit more in a little more detail?
Yeah, great question. So are you born with? I don't know if you're born with it, but I think once you're aware that fear is not real, you start looking at it a little bit differently. Meaning, you ever seen the movie Earth with Will Smith and his kid, and it's like a sci-fi movie, and they come to the planet Earth, and he has a conversation with his kid. He goes, "Listen, fear is not real. It's all in your head. Danger is real, but fear is completely made up. It's stories that we tell ourselves to stay safe because, early thousands and thousands of years ago, if we walked into a dark cave, your fear senses would go off in order to get out of that dark cave because you could sense danger, and it was a survival tactic. Today, we got locks on our doors, and we have it's a pretty safe place to live. We don't have those types of dangers of being, eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or something. But all those fear, those mental things have not gone away over time. So it's just a different type of fear. It's fear of what could happen if I bought this apartment building and it doesn't work out. What could happen if I make this investment and I go bankrupt? What would happen? And your mind naturally goes negative in all those scenarios. Yeah. And what I learned early on is that fear and faith are the same thing. Both are believing in something that has not come true. The difference is one is positive and one is negative. And here's the real cool part. We get to choose which one we want to follow. So instead of saying, hey, I can't buy that apartment building because what if everybody vacates? I can't do that investment because what if I go bankrupt? I thought, what if I bought that apartment building and I get filthy rich? What if I make that investment and I build legacy wealth with it? And so instead of focusing on the negative, on the fearful aspect of investing, because I was aware and I had that social consciousness of that fear, and that it's not real, I just decided to be faithful and positive in that regard. So I just focused on the opportunities in the obstacle versus the obstacle in the opportunities. And I just didn't, what's the worst thing that could happen to a 23-year-old kid who doesn't have any money or net worth anyways? Like, the worst thing that could happen is my property could go vacant and I lose out on a $20,000 investment and I move back in with my parents. Like, that's the worst thing that could happen. And that's not all that bad. Like, now things have shifted. I'm 33 years old now. I have a wife. I have 2 kids. I have a mortgage. I have some other stuff. But still, at the end of the day, there's certain safety nets you can put in place, and LLCs and legal documentation and umbrella liability policies and all those things. So that way, as you grow your net worth, as you grow your balance sheet, and as you grow your income, there's certain safety nets that can keep on increasing as you increase as well. So that way you don't fall too far. And that's why God invented attorneys and insurance, to make sure that you can cover your assets. And so at the end of the day, man, I don't focus on the worst case scenario, what could happen. I focus on what possibilities could I create? What type of legacy wealth can I create? What kind of an impact and difference can I create in the world by helping other people and educate them that there's more out there than just going to school and getting a job and working for somebody else to build up their wealth. Like, this stuff is not as complicated as we make it out in our heads. And, you get a basis of knowledge by listening to podcasts, by reading books, by plugging into seminars and coaching, and make sure you're aligning with good people, obviously. But there's a lot more out there if you're willing to go out and get educated. I see a lot of people who stop getting educated as soon as they graduate from high school or college. And the reality is, man, I'm reading books. I'm plugging into mastermind groups and doing all those things on a monthly basis to make sure I'm continuing my education on all these different strategies and surrounding myself with smart people, attorneys, CPAs, entrepreneurs, people who have been there, done that I can look up to and who can mentor me on next level type stuff. Because the reality is, like, as you go through different levels of business and you get up to you're self-employed, and then you hire your first employee, and then you start building out a team, and then you have a big team, and then you're doing $10 million in revenue, and then you're doing $20 million in revenue, and then you have a $100 million real estate portfolio. Like, there's different levels in business, and there's also different levels of problems that come with each of those levels. And so it's really important to always be learning, to have a mentor, to plug into a mastermind group where you can bounce these ideas, strategies, issues, problems, hurdles off of other people in the group, and they can help get you through those hurdles that much faster, because they're like, the collective brain power in the room is like, hey, yeah, no problem. I just went through that 6 months ago. Here's what I did. Here's what I wouldn't do again. And here's how I would craft it. And all of a sudden you're learning from somebody else's mistakes, and it's able to fast track you to the place you want to be.
Awesome. You answered my follow-on question to what you initially said there about focusing on the positive versus the negative, because both of those are present in any given situation. It's just what we choose to focus on at that one particular time. And my follow-on question was going to be, how do you stay in touch with reality and don't delude yourself into just focusing on the positive without forgetting about the negative? And you answered that great, because I think, like you said, surrounding yourself with good people who have your back, can identify blind spots. That's been very useful in me starting this podcast, and I know it's going to be useful for me in my real estate investing journey that I'm just embarking on here too. And I just wanted to again highlight that for everyone there. And you can't lose touch with the reality as well. As positive as you are, you have to also, not lose touch with the reality, and problems are problems. They just need a solution.
Yeah. And that's why, again, you, just like you said, you surround yourself with people who can protect your blind spots. I still meet with my financial advisor, my insurance agent, my CPA, and my attorney on a quarterly basis to make sure that I'm saying, hey, here's where we're at. Here's what we did. Here's where we're going. Where do you guys see anything that we can tighten up and just make sure that we're limiting our liability? Because the last thing you want to do is work as hard as we work to build a big portfolio of assets and not have all your T's crossed or I's dotted. And for, a stupid reason, all of a sudden subject yourself to some certain liabilities that you could have covered up with insurance, that you could have covered that blind spot with some legal documents or whatever that looks like. So, obviously you always do the right thing, and that's going to eliminate a lot of those issues. But there's also some craziness out there, and sometimes things that are out of your grasp, outside of your control, and just crazy people. Sometimes you need to make sure that you protect yourself against. So that's why I'm always meeting with those professionals to cover the weak side. My organization, I have a COO who's very opposite minded of me. Not that he's negative. He's just always looking out for the downside and always looking to minimize expenses, where I'm always looking at the growth and how to build up the business more and do more in revenue. So it's a good complementary relationship where I'm working on one side, he's working on the other side, and it builds a positive business environment that way. Yeah, and you guys probably both tell each other what you guys need to hear, not what you want to hear as well. You can't surround yourself with a bunch of yes men. Yeah, exactly. So let's dig into a little bit of commercial real estate, how you go about investing in that. Maybe let's start breaking that down a little bit for people who are listening, and maybe they've had this passing interest in commercial real estate. What is the first step if someone wants to get into this? Maybe they don't have the time, and they might have some money they might want to invest. Let's start going down that path a little bit here. Yeah. So commercial first thing is to get out of your own head. Commercial real estate is not as complicated as a lot of people think. I remember when I was first getting involved in real estate, I thought, commercial real estate's that prize at the end of the road, where I want to get to eventually, but I couldn't get there right away because I didn't have a degree from Wharton School of Finance. I didn't have a CCIM initials or whatever those, I don't even know what that means, but it's like what all the commercial brokers have. I didn't come from generational wealth where my granddaddy bought a bunch of apartment buildings back in the 50s and be educated on all that stuff. So I think that's in a lot of people's heads, that commercial real estate's a little bit more complicated than it really is. And so like I do some coaching and stuff, and I always tell my students, like, let's simplify it. Let's take it to a third grade level. If it's above a third grade level, I don't do it because it's too complicated for me. Yeah. But I've been able to take complicated things and simplify it very much to like residential terms. So just like there's after repair value in residential, they have the same thing. It's just called stabilized value in commercial. Just like there's return on investment in residential, it's called a cap rate in commercial. So it's just a little bit different verbiage. And the reality is commercial real estate's easier to invest in than residential, because residential, there are laws and regulations in place to protect like the little old lady who inherited a property, her husband passed away, and she isn't sophisticated with real estate investments, and they want to make sure that people don't take advantage of that little old lady. And that makes total sense. That's why there's all sorts of rules and regulations on real estate agents who are in the residential realm, who are listing residential properties. And there's a lot of that stuff going on. In commercial realm, you're seen as a more sophisticated investor. So it's almost like the wild, wild west. The financing's very different. It's easier for me to get a $3 million mortgage on an apartment building than it is for me to get a $300,000 mortgage on a single family house. How backwards is that? It makes absolutely no sense, but I'm seen as a more sophisticated investor because I'm doing investment real estate, commercial real estate. And so the rules and the regulations are either non-existent or much more lax than on the residential side. So that's one thing you need to be aware of, is that you can actually do more in commercial real estate, and if you understand that, it's a little bit just more lax, I guess. So if I was getting started, there's probably two types of people who are listening to this. One is active real estate investors, people who want to be boots on the ground. Maybe they have time and they have knowledge, or they're willing to get the knowledge and they're willing to do the work, but maybe they don't have access to financial resources. So if I was that person, I'd find a mentor who could teach me how to go through that path of finding awesome deals. Mm-hmm. If you can find deals, then there's always value in investing, in you as the deal finder. The other thing is finding money. If you can go find money or find deals, you're always going to be able to be successful in real estate investing, regardless of the asset class that you're in. Mm-hmm. Those are the two biggest things. And then joining a mastermind, I think, helps bridge the gap also for any issues that you run into on the way. But if I was an active investor, I'd get really good at finding deals. If I were a passive investor, I would find somebody who knows what they're doing. I wouldn't find a newbie. I'd find somebody who has a track record of success. And you can passively invest in those projects. Look at the return. Look at the asset. But most importantly, look at the borrower. Are they the type of person who has the fortitude to repay you your money? Are they the type of person who would go work third shift at Burger King if the market, goes into a tailspin and they lose all your money? Just to make sure that you get paid back, would they go, do anything it takes to do that? And so, like, my investors appreciate that I have that type of mindset and that I have that type of fortitude. And so, make sure that you find somebody. There's somebody in every local market. There's somebody who there are people who buy nationally. So, hang out in your real estate investors association, see who's actually moving and shaking, call up some commercial mortgage brokers and find out who's pretty active in the marketplace and has a good business model. Sit down with them, learn from them, hear their track record, talk to other people who have invested with them. If you're looking to take some money and put it with a certain operator, and see how you get compensated. Some operators offer straight debt, which is just a fixed rate of return. So you lend your money and they pay you 8% return on investment and you get all your money back in 24 months. Okay. That's great. Especially with where the stock market is right now and Bitcoin, and people are realizing that they want to take their money out and put it in something sticky, something that's backed by a hard asset. Yep. There's a lot of that going on right now. So it's not, it's probably easier than ever to raise private capital right now for real estate investments. And then, if you're an active operator, get really good at going out and finding deals. If you can find deals, you can bring it to somebody like me. I'll buy it from you, pay you a wholesale fee, or maybe even give you some equity as a kind of like a partnership equity play in the project. So, you want to find people who are real equitable, who are fair with doing deals and joint venturing and all that kind of stuff, and who will kind of teach you the ropes as you get involved in projects with them. But there needs to be some sort of value that you bring to the table as well. Maybe that's a work ethic. Maybe that's the deal. Maybe that's the money. Maybe that's a certain skill set or expertise in general contracting or property management or whatever that looks like. But there needs to be some sort of value that you bring to the table if you want to partner up with somebody into the commercial realm.
Gotcha. So you mentioned finding good deals. What are some of the key markers of a good deal that, if someone's starting out, they can look for these key attributes of a deal?
So typically, because the market's so hot, there's not a lot of good deals through brokers, especially in commercial real estate. if you see a deal on the MLS or on the LoopNet, it's typically because that commercial broker, like going back to this, the rules and regulations, a residential agent would have to list that property in 72 hours if they got a listing. A commercial agent does not have to list the property. There's no rule or regulation that they have to list the property at all. So think about where a commercial broker is coming from. They want to earn both sides of the commission, right? They don't want to co-broke with anybody, so they're going to keep that as a pocket listing. That commercial broker then is going to, it's a small world of people who are actually buying commercial real estate. So they probably know who the top 20 buyers in town are, and they're going to pick up the phone and call those top 20 buyers. If you see a deal, if you see a property that hits the market, it's typically because the top 20 buyers all said no to that deal, at least in this economy right now. Right. So you got to be very aware that if you see a commercial deal hit the marketplace, it's because most of the sophisticated active buyers all said no to it because it's probably not a good deal. So be very aware of that. I find a lot of my deals the same way I found residential deals, and that's through marketing, whether that's direct mail marketing, it's calling for sale by owners, calling for rent by owners, It's calling up management companies, calling commercial mortgage brokers, asking them, who they know, who has some property that might be willing to sell, who they know who has an apartment building. I've gotten deals through my coin-operated laundry appliance guy. He's doing coin laundry for all these other apartment buildings, so he knows who's looking to sell. He knows who all the owners are and what their price point or pain point might be. Here's another one. This is a good one. Is my exterminator sends me deals a lot. My exterminator knows whose properties are rat infested or cockroach infested and are having major issues and occupancy issues as well. And so I get a lot of phone calls from them.
Yeah, it comes down to two things you mentioned before: resourcefulness and networking, right?
That's it, man. You got to get outside the box of going through brokers, especially in this hot of a market. You need to be willing to do the stuff that other people aren't willing to do in order to find the deals that other people can't find. Are you going to the building department? Are you asking them who's got violations on their properties? That's a big thing up here in Cleveland, Ohio. The building departments can be pretty tough, and they post violations on single family houses, and they do it on commercial properties too. So I can go there. They're going to tell me everybody who's got violations on their properties. And now I have a list of motivated sellers because the city's on their ass to make improvements and put a bunch of more money into the property. So I can reach out to them and say, hey man, just walk away from this thing. Let me come in. I'll take it off your hands for X dollars and get you out, get this headache off your back. And again, Kenyon, it goes back to resourcefulness. If you ask yourself better questions, you start getting better answers. Yeah. So where do motivated sellers hang out who own investment property? It's usually eviction court. They have a tenant in place, hasn't paid rent for months, so they're losing out on revenue. They're still covering the property taxes and insurance. Then they have to pay an attorney to go through the whole eviction process. Then they have to kick out the tenant. It's going to be 2-3 months. Then they have to put a few $1,000s into turning that unit. Then they have to pay the management company a leasing fee to place another tenant. And so it's 6 months of no revenue plus thousands of dollars out of pocket. And so I tell my acquisitions team, I was like, dude, go hang out down at the eviction court and meet real estate attorneys, meet property management companies, meet landlords who are all down there with motivated sellers that they're representing, or the motivated sellers are the landlords that are actually there. And that's the most upset that a rental property owner gets is when tenants aren't paying rent and they have to put money into a property. So those are very motivated sellers. You can get a lot of deals by hanging out at eviction court.
Yeah, it sounds like very similar to the process that I learned, doing land deals as well. You got to hang out, got to find where the properties are distressed and where people are just screaming at the top of their lungs via different methods, hey, this property is a bit of a burden to me. It's not like there's anything necessarily wrong with the property. It's just these people don't value their property as highly as you as the investor might. Mm-hmm.
Well, we can find a higher and better use for it. Yeah. We think in a more resourceful way. We think more outside the box. We take a look at a problem and we say, how can I make a business out of this? What's the highest and best return for this property, for this opportunity, for my time spending on this? And so I'm coming to you right now in my office building in Lakewood, Ohio, which is just outside of Cleveland. And I'm sitting in a 1910 historical mansion. Okay. This mansion is flanked by 2 apartment buildings. It was listed on the MLS 2 years ago and sat on the MLS for about 4 months before I made an offer on it. Everybody looked at this place because it's a cool area. It's a cool property, but it needed a ton of work. So it eliminates a lot of people who don't have the wherewithal to do the construction on it. It was a single family home, but built by one of the titans of industry back in the day. But now it's flanked by 2 apartment buildings. There's no yard, so nobody's going to live in there from a single family perspective.
Right.
And then there's some restaurateurs who looked at it, but the parking's not that good. And then there was like Airbnb or like a bed and breakfast type feel for it that some people looked at it as. But it's a cool location, but maybe not. I don't know, people who come in from out of town, they might want to be closer to downtown versus out in the suburbs a little bit. And so when I came in, I'm like, what's the highest and best use of this property? And I ask myself that question, and I go through all those different same scenarios: single family house, restaurant, some sort of commercial use. And I was like, you could probably make this into a pretty badass office. And so that's what I did. Like, you see the WeWork and the Regis type of concept where it's like a co-working type space. And that's what I ended up doing. I took this house, and it was all real choppy, like a 1900 house would be. And I was like, that's perfect, because I could make each room into its own little office. And so I turned this, 7,500 square foot house into a 9-unit office building. I moved my management company in there. I have my own office. I moved my investment company in there. So we take up 3 offices, and I leased out the other 6 spaces. And I leased it out very rapidly. There was a huge demand for it. And it's probably the highest and best use of this space. And I have a ton of rental income coming in. It covers all my expenses, covers my mortgage payment. And I have free office space in a beautiful neoclassical mansion in a prime area of town. So by thinking outside the box and always asking yourself, what's the highest and best use of this property? It gives you better answers by asking better questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a saying in the land business, there's a pig for every barn. There's an opportunity for every scenario or opportunity that you see out there. You just got, like you said, think outside the box. And I love how the way that you think about that, because so many people get narrow-minded or tunnel vision when it comes to, okay, this property or this, or even outside of residential, real estate investment and whatnot. People get honed in on their mental models, their own line of thinking, and don't take a step back and say, hold on, time out. Can we think about this a little bit differently? And what you just described applies to so many different areas of life as well. And again, I wanted to highlight that for the listeners there, that, hey, just take a step back and maybe just redirect your thinking to different situations. And, like I said, it goes beyond real estate investing. But Tim, we are starting to bump up against time here. I can't believe how fast the time has gone here. But before we run out of time, I wanted to make sure folks know how to connect with you, and if they want to learn a little bit more about you and what you have going on. I know you mentioned you do a little bit of coaching and whatnot. Maybe you can speak to that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm pretty active on social media. So on Facebook, you can find me, Tim Bratz, and my investment website's CLEturnkey.com. That's like Cleveland Turnkey. Mm-hmm. And then my coaching site is commercialempire.com, COMMERCIALEMPIRE.com. And we take complicated commercial real estate, or what's seen as complicated, and we break it down to just super easy bite-sized chunks that's very, very simple to relate to, like residential real estate. And doesn't matter what your background is, doesn't matter if you got a GED or a PhD, you can get involved in commercial real estate as long as you're building the right team of resources. And team of right skill sets. And what's cool about commercial real estate is we're dealing with multi-million-dollar projects versus, a $200,000 house where there's not that much juice in the squeeze when you flip a single family house. We're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars that get carved up on any given commercial apartment deal. And so there's enough juice in the squeeze where everybody can get paid and everybody can focus on their unique ability, and we can all partner up. And, in that scenario, a rising tide floats all boats, and 1 + 1 = 3. So, I appreciate it, man. Time flew by. I really thankful for you having me here. And again, really appreciate all the value that you're putting out there and all the content. So thank you, Kenyon.
No, thank you. And I look forward to staying in touch with you. And,
I'll be down in Charleston probably next summer. So we'll have to catch up and grab a bite to eat and hang out.
Hell yeah. And like I said, look forward to keeping in touch with you. And I'll drop all the resources that you mentioned in the show notes. And again, thanks again for your time.
Awesome. Appreciate it, buddy. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the Zero Excuses podcast. Join the conversation at kenyonzitska.com in our Facebook group. And don't forget to rate and subscribe to our show. We'll talk to you next week. And always remember, results, not excuses.